Welcome to Sew with Monty. We're going to do a old school buttonhole today. Now this would apply if you don't have a newer machine and you don't have the buttonhole attachment foot or the computerized program to make a buttonhole, and you have to use just a zigzag and a single needle stitch or straight stitch. The first thing I've done is drawn a line, the length of the buttonhole I want, and then I've put a dot at each end of it so I know where the actual end is. The second step is I'm going to take my straight stitch and put it on a very close length. I've used a 2, which is very unusual for me because I usually don't go this small, but in this case we're doing detail and we need a very short stitch length. So we're going to go number 2 and we're going to go down one side of this line and up the other side just slightly under 1/8 of an inch from the line over to each side of the stitch. Once we have this stitch done, we're going to hop over here to number 2. We'll come back down and we do a zigzag, and that's going to be set on a stitch length of 0.5 and a stitch width of 1.5. Now your machine may need to be adjusted. These lengths and widths that I'm giving you might need to be adjusted. What I suggest you do if you want to try to do a manual buttonhole is practice on a little scrap. I've just put some interfacing on here to use as a practice to do. So I come down this side, 0.5, 1.5 width, and then when I get to the very end, I make sure my needle is on the outside edge of this zigzag. I put the needle in the fabric, lift up on the foot. Then I readjust the width of this stitch to 5. That's the width. And I make my length 0. I don't want it to move at all. And then I just carefully go back and forth about 4 times with this 5 stitch, ending up with my needle on the opposite side. Needle in the fabric, foot up. And then I'm going to turn it around like this, set it back on the 0.5 length and the 1.5 width, and I'm going to come down this side and finish it off with the 5 and 0 length so that I end up with a buttonhole. This was my practice. It's not quite as nice, but this will be my finished buttonhole right here. See? And then you just cut it open and there you have a buttonhole. Now that I've explained it to you, we're going to actually go through the motions of doing it. So I'm going to put my fabric in here and I'm going to align my needle before I put my foot down just about a shy 1/8 away from that center line and right at my dot at the top. And then I'm going to set my stitch length to 2 and I'm on a single stitch, a straight stitch. So I'm going to come gently down through here, try to keep it as parallel to that center line as I can. When I get to the bottom, I want to make sure I'm aligned with the dot, and then I pivot. I'm not quite aligned with the dot, so I'm going to move it over just a little bit so I'm right in line with that dot, and I'm going to simply do 2 stitches. So I'm just going to go 1, 2. Keep the needle in the fabric and pivot it one more time and come down this side. So we're building a rectangle with this stitch. The more precise you are with this rectangle, the better your buttonhole will be. So if you have to lift up your foot and hand place that needle, see, I've got to hand place the needle again because it's not quite at the dot. Now it's right at the dot. I'm going to go 1 and 2, and then I'm ready for my zigzag. So now I'm going to come down through here with my zigzag, my first zigzag. My stitch length is going to be 0.5, so I'm going way down, 0.5, and I'm going to put it on stitch zigzag mode. So I'm going to go 0.5, and my width is going to be 1.5. Now again, you have to adjust this for your machine. Your machine might be a little different. And what I want to do here is I'm just going to cross over that line with my zigzag. It'll bury that single stitch or that straight stitch right inside. When I get to the end, I want my needle to the left and in the fabric like that. Then I'm going to turn it, needle still in the fabric. Nope, sorry. I'm going to make my end first. So now I'm going to do my end. So I'm going to go to all the way to 0. That means it's not going to move at all. And I'm going to take my stitch width up to 5. And then I'm going to hand crank my needle until it comes all the way back over to this side. When it does, I want to reposition it so that the needle is in the corner of my buttonhole, aligned with my zigzag stitch. When I have that, I'm just going to go across through here about 4 or 5 times, and then put the needle in the right hand side. Then we needle in, rotate it around, reset it. We're going to go up to 0.5 for our length, and 1.5 for our length, or our width, sorry. 5 for the length, 0.5 for the length, 1.5 for the width. Now, as you can see, I'm on the wrong side, so I'm going to lift my needle up, and I'm going to put it almost in the fabric, and then realign that with my wide zigzag end, the end of my buttonhole. And then I can come down the other side with my zigzag. When I get close to the end, needle on the outside left, and then I can come back, and I want to go down to 0 in my length and up to 5 in my width. And then hand crank it, because you want to make sure that you put this needle in the right place. So as I come back over to the side, I want to reposition my buttonhole until the needle lines up on the outside edge of that zigzag. And then I just finish off this 4 or 5 times. Once I have it done 4 or 5 times, I just put it in one side and take the width measurement down to 0, and just go 1, 2, 3 right in the middle of the buttonhole. That just locks it. That's like tying a knot. And as you see, you make a buttonhole. It's a little bit confusing, but remember, small zigzag here, small stitch length. No stitch length, wide zigzag here. And if you remember those things and you get your measurements and write them down somewhere so you don't forget, you can make a manual buttonhole without ever having to use an attachment or any of your digital display selections. And that's a buttonhole.